Hello and welcome to the John Eric Show. Today we're going to interview actor Lorenzo Lamas. Lorenzo has starred in a number of hit TV series and been in over 50 movies. He is best known for his roles on CBS's Falcon Crest and in the syndicated TV show Renegade. He has also starred in other hit shows like The Bold and the Beautiful, Are You Hot, and Leave It to Lamas. Lorenzo is also a commercial helicopter pilot and an aircraft pilot who often flies disadvantaged children and adults too sick to travel normally on domestic flights. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to subscribe, like, comment, and follow us. We're also going to have a lot of great celebrity interviews coming up, so I encourage you to click on that notification bell so you can get notified every time we upload a new episode. I'd also like to tell you about HollywoodIsCalling.com. It's a great service that allows you to purchase live phone calls from your favorite celebrities, so check it out, HollywoodIsCalling.com. Now, let's say hello to Lorenzo Lamas. Hello, Lorenzo. Welcome to the John Ark Show. How are you today, sir?
John, thank you for having me. I'm just fine. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you. So first of all, I want to congratulate you because you have managed to achieve something quite extraordinary, and that is longevity in the entertainment industry. You've starred in a long list of movies and hit TV shows, and that is no trivial accomplishment. To what do you attribute your ability to achieve this kind of long-term success?
John, I have to tell you that a lot of it has to do with luck. It's just being at the right place at the right time, getting the right roles. As an actor, unless you are really smart with your money and can afford to wait it out until the right roles come along, you have to work. And I've always had to work. I've always had to put food on the table. I've always had to take care of children and so forth. So I've had to take work sometimes. And fortunately, the roles that I was offered were decent roles on long running shows like Falcon Crest and Renegade. So there's quite a bit of luck to it, in terms of longevity. But you also have to deliver the goods. You've got to be able to play the character and be believable, and you have to come across as someone that the audience likes to watch.
So when people come up to you and ask you for advice on getting into the industry, what do you normally say? Do you have a stock answer, or do you evaluate them case by case?
It's a case by case thing. It depends on how old they are, right? So a lot of young people have approached me about beginning a career in acting, cinema, whatever, and I tell them to get involved in their local theater, whether it's in school or whether it's in a regional theater capacity, because acting starts from building the character. Mm-hmm. And there's no better training in the world for an actor than theatrical training to learn how to put a character together and to really assemble a convincing role that way. If they're older, if they're in their 20s and 30s and they're just thinking about getting into it now, I really recommend they go to a wonderful film acting school. It's a difference between theatrical acting and film acting. I'm not going to get into all the details with you today, John, but in a nutshell, film acting trains you how to be prepared from the dressing room to the set. You might only have 10 minutes when they say, John, we need you on the set, and you have to already be in that character. And, so that's film acting. You don't have as long to get prepared as you do on stage. On stage, you have weeks to rehearse. You block the whole play out for weeks in advance. And then it's just a matter of repeating that performance every night. So you get into kind of a comfortable zone. But film acting it's like a cold shower. It's like, get ready and go and stand on those marks. There's the camera. There's your scene partner. Go, action. So it's a different mindset.
Now, your father was actor Fernando Lamas. Did you feel a lot of pressure to continue the family acting legacy?
No, I didn't actually. I didn't even think about being an actor until I was 18, maybe 19 years old. I never thought I had the ability to follow in my parents' footsteps. I thought I was just a short, fat kid with glasses and braces. I never imagined myself as a leading man. But that changed for me after I graduated from high school and went to a junior college. I decided to go to junior college 1 year before I went to university to figure out what it was that I really wanted to do with my life. At the time, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. So I took about a year off before I went to pre-medicine. And during that year, I took different courses in this local college. I took criminal justice. I took acting. I took language, just as kind of a rounding out my formal education, deciding what I wanted to do. And I kind of fell in love with theater. I joined the college theater group, and I, of course, told you that I went to acting class. That was one of the classes that I took, and I just, for the first time, thought about it. And then, I told my dad I didn't want to go to university to study veterinary medicine. I told him that I wanted to go to acting school and follow in his footsteps and act. And he said, "Oh my God, why would you do that?" But I really felt like if I didn't try it, at least at that age, at that time, I might have lived a life to regret it.
Sure. So you start on Falcon Crest, and that was a huge hit. Tell me about the effect a massive hit like that has on your career and on your personal life.
Well, let's talk about the career first. It's a tremendous feather in your cap to be on a hit television show. Then you become known. You become an actor that has a job. When casting agents and producers and writers have you come in to audition for something, it's always nice to walk in a room and say that you're currently working, rather than say, "Well, I haven't worked in 6 months." So that was a definite plus. In terms of how, how a successful career as an actor in show business affects your personal life is more than twofold. First of all, you're afforded luxuries that prior to getting on a show or prior to having the fame or the celebrity, you just never get offered. Like, there's first class travel, there's first class hotels wherever you go. There's, you have an assistant, a public relations person, an agent, a manager that are basically, holding your hand through life and making things easier for you. That really doesn't happen to, us normal people. But when you become a successful actor and you're working on a regular basis, these things are around you, and they can allow you to fall into traps of not being able to do things for yourself, or not expecting people to do things for you, instead of just handling things on your own, like you did before. Now, I had a very good opportunity to talk to my father at length about a motion picture career and television career, because of course he was in that career. And he told me, he said, "Lorenzo, never forget to be nice to everybody on your way up the ladder, because you'll see them again, all of them, on your way down." He said that if you're lucky enough to have a career in show business, count your blessings and always treat people with respect, with dignity, and, never think that, you're better than anybody else. And, as an adult, that makes sense. But as a kid, you're getting all these things, all these travel and all this luxury. It sometimes can affect the way you think. You can sometimes start to think that, hey, why am I standing in line here? When I should be at the front there. Like, let me call my publicist and maybe we can jump this line, for getting on an airplane or attending a premiere or whatever it might be. So there's a trap that a lot of people fall into, and they forget to be human beings, and they they just think that their world is all that matters. They live in a bubble. So those are some of the pitfalls that can, that can derail someone. And there's also excess. There's a lot of people will start to come around you when you have fame and when you have fortune, and they'll maybe tempt you with different things that aren't healthy for you, whether it's just going out every night or whether it's drugs, alcohol, what have you. And when you're young, it's difficult to know that this isn't what you just want to go have fun. So those are some of the pitfalls, and I did fall into a couple of them. Fortunately, by the grace of God, I was able to, not become addicted to anything. And I always had, a 6 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. makeup call to attend. So I couldn't literally stay out till 3 a.m. and then be fresh and ready to go with pages of dialogue memorized by 6:30 a.m. So,
yeah, I used to work as a producer for Oprah, and I remember flying into Chicago my first week at the studio, and it was a few days before I actually met her. And it was a heady experience because I'm in Chicago. I got a job working for Oprah as a producer, and my pride really, really sort of just took on monstrous proportions. I thought, this is incredible. And so one day I'm walking through the studio and I meet her for the first time. And now, mind you, she's now one of the biggest personalities in the world. She's a billionaire. And the first thing that strikes me about her is how modest she was when we spoke. So humble, so modest. That was a huge lesson for me. Don't let this little bit of success you're having cause you to think something that's not true. And it was a gargantuan lesson for me. So it really impressed me. And I think everybody needs to learn that lesson.
100%.
Yeah. So you were in a monstrous hit called The Renegade that had massive success in syndication. How did that project come to you?
Well, I had read for Stephen Cannell on many of his other television shows. I read for him, audition for guest starring roles on The Greatest American Hero, A-Team, Wise Guy, and I just never got the part. And it was quite frustrating because I must say I probably read for Stephen Cannell maybe 5 or 6 times, and I would always call my agent after the interview and I would say, well, how did the audition go? Have you gotten any feedback? And he would just tell me, he said, they loved you, Lorenzo, but they're going in a different direction. And we never know what that direction is as an actor. You just have to say, well, I did the best I can and it's not meant to be, blah, 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 move on next. So one day my agent gets a call from Stephen Cannell, and Stephen asked my agent if Lorenzo wouldn't mind coming in to interview for not an audition, just an interview, like a meeting on a show that he's thinking about, dusting off. It was on the shelf for a couple of years, he said. And Stephen told my agent that, I have Lorenzo in mind for this. And so my agent called me and he goes, so Stephen wants to meet you. Are you available this afternoon? And I said, am I available? I'm out the door. So I drive down to Stephen's office, very impressive. He's got his practically owns the building. And on the top of the building on Boulevard and La Brea, it says Cannell Studios with that famous logo of the paper, coming out of the typewriter. And I go, my God, this is and I'd been there several times before, for auditions, but he wants to meet me. What on earth does he want to talk to me about? So I walk in, I say hello to his secretary, his assistant, Grace. She goes, oh, nice to see you, Lorenzo. Stephen is waiting for you. What? Wait a second. Stephen is waiting for me. Oh my God. So my heart's racing 1,000 times a minute. And I walk into Stephen's room and he's there behind his couches with this, coffee table, and he's got his desk over there on one side and all his Emmys are lined up on the shelf. And I'm going, oh my God, this is like a dream. And I sit down at the couch across from him, and he slides a script across the coffee table, and I catch it. And on the cover, it says, Vince Black, an American hero. And I said, what is this? And he goes, well, Lorenzo, he goes, there's a character that is the lead of this television series, and we're going to go straight to syndication. We're not going to go to a network. I already have a syndicated kind of package set up where we can sell directly to the stations all over the US and all over the world, directly to the stations without having a third party, like a network. And I have you in mind for this role. Would you mind reading it, taking it home, reading it, and then like getting back to me? I go, well, of course, I would love to do that. And he goes, oh, by the way, I'd like your hair the way it is. Would you mind keeping your hair that length? And I had grown it at that point. It was about shoulder length. I had grown it out for a movie that I did about the Spanish conquistadors. And we shot it in Colombia, 6 weeks of filming in Colombia and South America. And I came, literally was in town for a week. And I said, no, I'll keep it this length. And he goes, also, do you ride a motorcycle? I go, well, as a matter of fact, I do. I have been for years. And I had a copy of it. I had a picture of it in my wallet. I said, would you like me to show you the bike? And he goes, sure. So I took the picture of my 1992 Harley Davidson Softail out of my wallet, and I showed him the picture. And he goes, that's a beautiful bike with the flames and everything. So can we use that bike? I said, well, of course, you know, he tells me to take the script home and then call him the next day and tell him what I think about it. But he's already like got me in the role with the hair and the bike and this whole thing. And I'm really thinking that this is a dream. So I say, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Cannell. He goes, call me Steven. Call me Steven. So I go, thank you, Steven, for your time. I'll definitely, you know, get back to you tomorrow. And I left his office like on cloud 9. And 3 weeks we were filming we filmed just a little, what they call a presentation tape to take to NAPTE, which is the National Association of Producers and Television Executives. It's a mouthful. But basically what they do at NAPTE, and Oprah is there every year. All the game shows are there. All the talk shows are there. All these shows like Baywatch and Highlander and Renegade, they're all there to sell directly to the stations. As you know, syndication is all about getting the numbers up. So you have 90% of the country covered. He told me after NAPTE that he had 95% of the covered of the 95% of the country sold on Renegade within the first 3 days of NAPTE. So we were going right to series, right to 22 episodes, and that series is probably the best experience of my life. Nice. All the people that I met on the show, the co-stars that came down. I mean, I rode Johnny Cash on my motorcycle on Renegade. I mean, that just doesn't happen. So
now let me ask you a business question. Falcon Crest aired for about 227 episodes on CBS, and the syndicated show Renegade aired for, I believe, 110 episodes. Without getting into personal financial details, which situation generally pays better? A network show on CBS like Falcon Crest or a syndicated show like Renegade?
Well, network shows always pay the best because, first of all, well, we were SAG on Renegade, but a lot of the non-union shows that go to syndication aren't necessarily SAG. So you're not guaranteed residuals. You're not guaranteed, 10-hour turnaround, from day to day. There's a lot of things that the union protects you as an actor from. But the interesting part is Falcon Crest did not sell in syndication because every episode had to run in continuity as every soap opera does. So syndication, the television stations want to plug and play. They want to put this show this week. They want to put that show that week. They want to plug and play. And you can't plug any show into a continuing drama. It doesn't work because you'll have plot lines that get jumbled, plot lines that get ruined because you can't just put episode 6 in a slot to air before you put in episode 5. It won't make any sense. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
So Syndication is horrible for shows like Dallas and Dynasty and Knots Landing and Falcon Crest, but it's very good for shows like Friends, and generally sitcoms, Three's Company. All those shows, you could plug them in because they begin and they end. Every show has a beginning and an end, so it's independent of each other episode. But generally speaking, network is the way to go. In syndication, as an actor, it's not very good because it's low budget. So a lot of the agents for their clients will negotiate a higher per episode salary versus the residual end, because they know that there's no guarantee for residuals in syndication. It might go 2 seasons and then there's no residuals because they won't have enough shows to put it in syndication or in residuals.
Now, Netflix is writing massive paychecks, but they're not giving anybody back end on anything. So does that suggest to you that the network deal is still the best option for most actors on most projects? Or is it
Yes.
too project dependent?
I would say, generally speaking, it's the network, especially if you're on a sitcom, because the syndication and the residuals and, will be endless. 2.5 Men is still making millions for Charlie Sheen and John Cryer.
Look at all the Seinfeld money. Yeah.
All the Seinfeld money, because these shows will keep going on forever. You think of the stars back in the day when they were doing Green Acres and and Gilligan's Island and those wonderful old shows. Those actors were not protected in terms of, SAG just didn't have the language at that point to guarantee that they would get paid residuals for the entirety of time, whereas now basically they are.
So you also did a movie called Grease with John Travolta. What was that experience like? And did you get to know John very well?
Well, Grease was my first taste in big budget motion picture production. It was a heady experience, to say the least. I show up on the lot. I'm 2 years out of high school. I don't know my ass from my elbow. And I'm on the set with these huge stars. John had the success of Saturday Night Fever behind him already, so it's like, wow, I'm going to play a small role in this huge movie. So it was just an incredible rush for me. And John was very approachable, but we were on different levels, John had his own trailer, right? I was sharing a dressing room with 2 other actors. So it's just a different level. But, we met on the set. Of course, years later, we would run into each other, at different events. And he was always so friendly and very, very engaging.
So I have a theory, and you'll have to tell me if you agree or disagree. John Travolta is an actor who, like you, has had tremendous longevity and success, and who, like you, is also a pilot. Do you think that the discipline and skills that you and Travolta needed to have as pilots enhanced your professionalism and your work ethic in a way that helped both of you have long-term success as actors?
That's an interesting question. I thought about it, but in the other way around. I thought that having a good acting career background helped me to become a better pilot because of the attention to detail that you have to have as an actor. Of course, details everything. When you're a pilot, you can't let anything escape you. Being a pilot is just a series of mitigating risks, and as an actor, it's the same. You want to be honest in your performance as an actor, and you have to be honest with yourself as a pilot and not fly into that weather just because you think you can. You got to know the weather and know when to say no. Know when to say, I'm not going. And that's a trap that a lot of pilots fall into because they don't have that attention to detail.
So you've done a significant number of action movies over the years. Tell me about doing those movies from a business standpoint. Were they being done overseas for tax incentives or to reduce production costs or for some other reasons? I remember at one point you telling me that you were doing movies, I believe, in South America.
Right. There was a movie that I did in South America that was shot in 2 languages.
Yeah.
And most of the movies that I did were either shot in Canada or overseas, Bulgaria, for example, and it was because of the cost effectiveness. You know, there are motion picture crews in Bulgaria that have been doing movies for 40 years. They're highly skilled, and the companies that choose to shoot overseas can save a bundle on that because the crews are so much less expensive to use. The locations are less expensive to find, to rent, and you know, that cost saving is hopefully put on the screen. But sometimes it's put in the pockets of the producers, unfortunately.
So logistically, how much more difficult are action movies to film overseas than, say, a straight drama or comedy?
Action movies are more difficult because you have, for example, on a page in a script, you have World War III begins. Okay, so you have to allocate the time and the shots, you know, the characters, everything that you're filming for World War III. It could take days, it could take weeks, you know, it could take, you know, a long time to shoot World War III versus a page of dialogue between two people. So generally speaking, I mean, it's really difficult to do action movies and do it well because most of the time the action is left to the very end of the day or the very end of the shoot, and you've got to hurry up and scramble and put together some kind of an action sequence. You've got to put this action sequence together without jeopardizing believability and without jeopardizing shots to tell the story of what's happening in the action. So it's very complicated.
So were you working primarily as an actor, or did you also direct or produce some of those projects?
Well, I was acting in most of the projects that I've done. I directed a couple of projects that I was not in, but most of the directing, I've just done a handful of directing jobs. It's not like I've had this whole career as a director. I've done maybe a handful, like several television episodes and two motion pictures. And so, yes, I was directing and acting in the same, and that's challenging in itself. You know, I had a stuntman friend of mine that would stand in and do the scenes for me, so I could see what it looked like as a director. But that's just, you know, that's
So
logistics.
were there any reoccurring problems that you experienced over and over as you worked overseas? Perhaps logistical problems, perhaps crew problems, anything that reoccurred on a regular basis?
There's a communication challenge between production and the crews, obviously, because we don't all speak Bulgarian or Czech or whatever the case may be. So there can be some issues regarding that because they very rarely will take a key person, like say the key grip or the key makeup or even the key stunt coordinator. They'll usually hire on the ground in the country. So the only principals they're taking are the actors, really, and the line producer. Everything else is done in a different language with different people.
Right. So tell me how the marketplace has changed over the years. Was it easier to raise funding for a project 10, 15 years ago, or is it easier now given the introduction of all the streaming money? What would you guess?
Well, I've been out of active motion picture involvement for probably 6 years, for as long as I've been a pilot now. And you know, I got out before Netflix was really a thing. So I can only surmise that it's probably easier to get motion pictures. I mean, aside from the pandemic, I would say it's probably easier to get financing for projects, given that most projects now are very, very low budget. You know, they rarely do big budget movies unless they're under a studio tent. So, yeah, Netflix, for example, I think their budget for most of their big movies are like 6 to 7 million, maybe 10 million. You know, you can't do any Marvel movie for under 50 or 60 million or 100 million. So, I think given the fact that there's more places to put the product, it's probably easier getting financing for a movie. You know, like I said, aside from what we're going through right now.
Right. So
as a world.
So I was watching this documentary about a Western your father starred in with Burt Reynolds and Raquel Welch. It was called 100 Rifles. And they were talking about how Raquel Welch treated some of the other actors in the movie. Did your father ever have any difficulties or challenges with her on that movie, or any stories from that set?
I'll tell you, I visited Dad on the set that summer. I was 10 years old. And I remember Raquel and Burt having dinner with us on a regular basis with Tom Grise, the director, and Dad, and Esther, Esther Williams, my dad's wife. And I remember falling asleep at the table, looking at the candles, and these people were just having a wonderful time, enjoying each other, enjoying they filmed that in Almeria, Spain, beautiful part of Spain. And there was no, that I could see, that I could tell, there was absolutely no problems with Raquel. She was just a beautiful, wonderful person.
Yeah. So speaking of Burt Reynolds, he sort of changed the entire action dynamic by introducing comedy and levity and sort of this lighthearted banter. Changed the whole action equation. I know you said you're only 10 years old, but what were your thoughts about Burt as you saw him there at the table?
Well, Burt taught me how to throw my first screen punch on the set of that movie. We were just horsing around one day, and he goes, Lorenzo, I do fight scenes. Your dad does the fight scenes. We don't really hit each other. And I go, you don't? He goes, no, well, Lorenzo, we can't hit each other, or else we'd be in the makeup trailer all day long. So you have to fake the punch. I said, well, how do you do that? He goes, okay, I'll show you. So just throw a punch at me, but don't come near my face. Just throw a jab and watch what I do. So I threw a jab, and he rocked his head back, and he goes, that's how you do it. Throw another one. Boom. He rocked his head back, and I'll never forget it.
That's great. What a great story. So, Lorenzo, you have a very large Latin American following. So I suspect projects like Narcos would be a natural fit for you. Have you ever thought about that, exploring that sort of avenue?
Yes, of course. But, John, I've been out of it for 6 years now, and I frustrate my agent to no end, because he knows he's got to bring me a project that's going to be more than one episode for me to just go to my company and say, I'm quitting. When you quit a job, especially in the helicopter community, it's a very small community. It's not like flying for an airline, where they can plug somebody in the next day. You quit a job when you're flying helicopters, it's a big deal. These companies are a lot smaller, and you take a pilot out of a rotation, and it's a big deal, and it probably wouldn't be appreciated very much. So I've always told my agent, the last 5-6 years anyway, bring something to me, but bring something to me that has longevity. Bring me a television series. Bring me some recurring role that I could substantiate going into the office and saying, hey guys, you know what? Here's the deal. I'm going to start a motion picture. I'm going to start a television series in about, 4 or 5 weeks. I'll be gone for this amount of time. Would you need to replace me, or do you think you can hold the slot for me? And it's never come. So I think I frustrate him greatly because I tie his hands. I'm sure he would love me to be on an episode of Narcos, but I can't do it. I've spent too much time. I've shed too much sweat and too many tears to quit a flying career for a Hallmark movie.
Right.
So
yeah, it's not a trivial decision. I understand completely. So are you living in California or Nevada now?
I'm living in California. So I'm flying for a company in Southern California.
Gotcha.
I was in Vegas in 2015, and then I went to New York to fly for a company there for a couple of years, and I've been back here for 3 years now.
So things are changing dramatically in California, as I'm sure you can tell just by watching the news. A lot of my celebrity friends are getting out of Dodge. Have you ever thought about it, or are you comfortable at this stage staying there for a while?
I love it here in Southern California. I love it here in Los Angeles. There might be some changes in my location in the not too distant future, because my fiance, who lives in Idaho, is also sharing custody with her ex-husband with her two boys. So there's a question of, after we're married, where are we going to settle down? And, if she's up there in Idaho, then I might have to move up there, at least for a while, to figure out, how we're going to get, everybody down here again. She loves California. When she comes down and visits me, on the weeks that she doesn't have her children, she loves it. And she was here as a model for 10 years in the 2000s. Mm. So her desire has always been to come back to Southern California, but I might have to go up there for a little while before we can do that again. And again, that's it's off in the future at some point.
So you're a very accomplished pilot, both aircraft and helicopter. How old were you when you began to fly?
I was 39 when I started flying.
Okay.
So and I started flying airplanes, and then it was as a hobby. I was just finished with Renegade, so I had the means to pay for the instruction and the aircraft and all that, and I became quite smitten by the whole aviation world. I just loved flying to different airports and having lunch at different cafes that hadn't changed in 40 years. It was like going back in time almost. So I loved it. And then I took my first helicopter, an introductory lesson, like 4 years later. I think it was like 2001. And then I became obsessed with helicopters. But I had to leave aviation altogether for about 10 years to raise my three young kids. I got sole custody of my three youngest children. So there's no way that I could afford to fly for fun anymore. I had to raise these girls. And so after 10 years of being out of aviation, they were old enough to basically, look after themselves for a few hours in the evening after school. And I went back to aviation and I got my flight instructor certificate to help build time to become a professional pilot.
Nice. So I've been told that flying a helicopter is very complicated, and it's like trying to balance one basketball on top of another. Is that a fair analogy? Is that how difficult it really is?
Just in the beginning. It's just when you get used to the controls of the helicopter. There's a lot of moving parts, and all the parts don't go in the same direction. So there's a lot of forces working against each other, and that's what you're feeling through the controls, right? So, but once you get the hang of it, once you can basically hover, you've got it. It just takes people a long time to hover. It took me, probably, oh my gosh, I don't know, a dozen tries without the instructor's hands on the controls before I could hover.
So there are a lot of flight simulators that are available now for people's personal computers to help them learn. Has that dramatically made it easier to learn?
I'm not sure. I didn't have access to those at the time when I was learning. But I'll tell you, having flight simulation does help in many, many ways for a pilot that wants to move up into the higher levels of training, being a commercial pilot, for example, or getting an instrument rating, for example. A lot of scenarios that you have to learn how to deal with in an aircraft sometimes can take a lot longer to do in a real aircraft in the sky than it can in a simulator. Because in a simulator, you can stop. If you're not sure where you are, you can stop. The instructor can stop the simulation and say, okay, well, let's think about it. Where were you at your last reporting point? And where is your next reporting point? Can you tell me that? So you can't do that in an airplane or a helicopter. So simulation has been great for training. I would venture to say I've flown a helicopter simulator, and it's absolutely nothing like flying a real helicopter. But airplanes, I have a lot of time in an airplane simulator, and that is quite similar.
So if you buy one of those Microsoft flight simulators and you get really good at it, you shouldn't get too confident about thinking that you're an actual pilot. Is that a fair assessment?
It's not. No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that simulation is great for learning about scenarios, about mitigating risk, about flying on instruments. Great for that. But in terms of learning, just the hands-on, the touch, landing the aircraft, you're not going to learn that on a simulator per se. Landing a helicopter, hovering a helicopter, it's just something that you have to do practically.
How many hours do you think you have in a helicopter over your entire career versus in a plane?
Well, I went to get my flight instructor certificate in a helicopter because I wanted to teach people how to fly those, not airplanes. So at that time, I had about 1,200 hours in airplanes and only about 300 hours in helicopters. So I taught for about 6 months. I did sightseeing tours for a smaller company here in Los Angeles for about a year. And I got myself up to 1,000 hours of helicopter time. Then I got the job in Vegas and so forth. So now I have 3,500 hours in helicopters and 1,200 hours in airplanes. So helicopters, they've taken over my life.
Is teaching people to fly a helicopter as as life-threatening as it sounds?
Yes, when you're close to the ground, things can happen quickly. Yes. And I'm glad I didn't have to do that very long. A lot of guys love teaching.
Yeah.
I love teaching. I love teaching people how to ski. But I love teaching people how to fly a helicopter, because when you're on the ground and your student is in the helicopter and you know that they're going to be flying in the pattern and landing and you feel confident that they can do it, it's a great feeling for both the instructor and the student. But it's sketchy.
Yeah, I imagine. So I understand that you sometimes fly disadvantaged children and people who need medical help. Is that true? And how did all that come about?
It's not it. I don't do that anymore. I did that when I owned my own airplane. So I did that 20 years ago for an organization called Angel Flight. And Angel Flight has bases all over the country. And the premise is that there's a lot of people that have needs, medical needs, that don't live near a huge hub, like Los Angeles or New York or Denver, or they live in rural areas and can only sit in a car and drive to the airport. So Angel Flight was developed so that these people in these rural towns, because every rural town has a local airport. So every rural town, every person that lives in the rural town can have a private person donate his time as a pilot, his aircraft, pick them up, within a half an hour from their home and fly them to their destination. So I used to do a lot of flights from, say, Lake Tahoe to San Diego. I was flying this one particular patient that was getting chemotherapy. And I did that for 3 months for that individual. I picked up children in Las Vegas and flown them to San Diego to the children's hospital there for radiation, whatever it was. And it was very, very worthwhile as a pilot to be able to do that, because, when you're not flying professionally and you own an airplane, there's just so many restaurants you can visit, and it gets really boring after a while. So this gave me something to do that was humanitarian, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it sounds tremendous. If someone were to start from scratch today with no experience at all, on average, how long would it take to get a pilot's license, and how long would it take to get a helicopter's license?
It takes about, I would say, 3/4 of the time to get an airplane license versus a helicopter. So the FAA says that you need at least 60 hours of instruction to be able to fly an airplane legally. It took me about 85 hours of instruction to really feel confident to pass the FAA test in airplanes. In helicopters, it's the same amount of time, but it took me 100 hours to be able to confidently put a designated flight examiner in my aircraft and fly him. So it's about 8 months to a year for airplanes, and about maybe 13, 14 months for helicopters. The cost is significantly more expensive in a helicopter. You can get a private pilot's license in an airplane or fixed wing for about $9,000. In a helicopter, it's going to run you about $13,000 to $14,000. But I really recommend anybody that has ever thought about flying helicopters to take an introductory lesson, with an instructor, because it can be life-changing. It was for me.
Mm.
And I started my professional career at 57 years of age.
Right.
So it's not impossible.
If you were to purchase your own dream airplane, or your own dream helicopter, which one would you buy?
Money, no object, John?
Money, no object.
Okay. Airplane would be the Citation 500. I'm typed in the business jet, the Citation 500. It's a single pilot jet, seats about 9 people. You got to make a stop between here and New York, but it's a great airplane, very functional, very safe, very reliable. That would be the airplane of my choice. Helicopter, it'd be a Bell. It'd be a Bell 407. And I love A-Stars. I've got more time in an A-Star than I do in a Bell 407. But I flew those in New York, and they're just beautiful. I love the Bell.
How much more difficult is it to be certified to fly a jet than it is a prop?
It's not that much more difficult. It's just systems. You know, somebody asked me this question a couple of weeks ago, like, what was it that they asked? They said, oh, when you move up the ranks in terms of the equipment that you fly, what is it that's so different between when you learn how to fly a smaller airplane versus a jet? And I said, you know, once you have the basics down, once you're an aviator, it's really just the systems that you have to learn. You don't have to learn how to fly anymore. You know how that works. You just have to learn the different systems, you know, the hydraulics, the electrical, you know, fuel distribution, that kind of stuff. It's all about that. And the higher up you move in the equipment, you know, the more complicated that study becomes. And that's why they have, you know, schools like flight safety and simuflight. You know, you do these great ground school for 2 weeks learning the systems of an aircraft. And then you're good to go. They're just airplanes.
So you were a good friend and a colleague of Kobe Bryant's pilot, Ara Zabayan, who was killed along with Kobe when their helicopter went down. Now there's been an investigation. Did they ever find out what caused that crash?
Well, the NTSB report hasn't officially come out.
Okay.
But there is a preliminary report that factored the weather in as, if not the main cause of the accident, as certainly a supporting factor in why that aircraft had lost control.
I've heard that your son got a license to become a bounty hunter. I'm guessing that being a bounty hunter in California now has got to be a very, very busy occupation. Is that the case?
I hope so, for his sake. Yeah. I hope he did finally get a license. I know I gave him my gun about 10 years ago. So I hope he's doing the right thing with it. No, it's, you know, fugitive recovery is a great career. Okay. It's a fascinating career. It's action packed. I have a very dear friend that's been doing it for about 20 years now. And he's the #1 fugitive recovery agent in the country. His name is Zeke Unger. And little Zeke's bail bonds. And my son went to him for training. I understand he did very well with it. So
nice. Well, before we wrap things up, is there anything that you would like to promote?
Yes, I would actually. My friend Antonio Sabato Jr. is putting together a cast. He has a script called Trailblazers. Conflicts Studios is his studio that he started in Florida. They're going to be focusing on positive content, not specifically, Christian-based movies, but a lot of them will be Christian-based movies. A lot of the action will be phenomenal. But he's a friend of mine, and we hope to be in production for this movie in June of this year. So yeah, give a shout out to Antonio.
Any idea where they'll be filming it? Will it be in Florida?
He's talking about Georgia.
Okay.
There's a lot of filming in Georgia and Kentucky as well as Florida right now because of the tax savings.
Right. Well, Lorenzo, it's been a real pleasure having you on the John Ark Show. I want to wish you continued success. And I believe that, like John Travolta, you too are going to enjoy many more years of work in both the entertainment industry and as a pilot. Thank you for being so generous with your time, and you are always welcome back on the show, sir.
It's been a great, great hour with you, John, and I look forward to the next time. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Thank you for being so well. I mean, you're a professional, but I mean, so well prepared, and I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate the compliments. I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, I want to thank my friend Lorenzo for coming on the show. And I also want to thank our viewers for watching and tell you that we're going to have more great celebrity interviews coming up and more breaking news stories. So we encourage you to subscribe to the channel and click on the notification bell so you can get notified every time we post a new episode. Thank you, and we will see you soon.